My daughter's wedding dress arrived at my house instead of hers. When I opened the box to check it, I found something that made my heart stop. Hidden in the layers of silk was a note that would expose a secret no mother should ever discover. Before we go further, please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and if you've ever discovered a truth that changed everything. I'm Linda Morrison, and for 3 months, I'd been helping my daughter Hazel plan what was supposed to be the happiest day of her life. She was marrying David Chun, a successful architect she'd met at a charity gala 2 years earlier. They seemed perfect together. He was charming, thoughtful, always making her laugh. I thought I knew everything about their relationship. I was wrong. It started on a Wednesday afternoon in late April. Hazel had ordered her wedding dress from an exclusive boutique downtown, but because she was traveling for work, she'd asked if the final delivery could come to my house. "Just keep it safe until the weekend, Mom," she'd said over the phone. "Don't peek. I want the first real look to be on my wedding day." I promised I wouldn't. But when the large white box arrived, carried carefully to my doorstep by 2 delivery workers, something felt off. The box was damaged on one corner, the cardboard torn and water-stained. My instinct as a mother kicked in immediately. What if the dress inside was ruined? Hazel had spent months finding the perfect gown. I couldn't let her discover damage on her wedding day. So I broke my promise. I opened the box. The dress itself was breathtaking. Layers of ivory silk and delicate lace, hand-sewn pearls catching the afternoon light streaming through my living room window. I carefully lifted it out, checking for any water damage or tears. Everything seemed perfect. I was about to put it back when my hand brushed against something hard tucked into the inner lining near the bodice. A small envelope, cream-colored, sealed, with Hazel's name written on it in handwriting I didn't recognize. My hands trembled as I held that envelope. Every instinct told me to put it back, seal the box, and pretend I'd never seen it. But something about the way it was hidden, deliberately tucked into the dress lining where Hazel would find it while getting ready on her wedding day, made my stomach twist with dread. I opened it. Inside was a handwritten letter on expensive stationery and a photograph. The photo showed David with another woman, a beautiful brunette with her hand resting on his arm, both of them laughing at some restaurant I didn't recognize. They looked comfortable together, intimate, the kind of ease that comes from knowing someone well. But it was the letter that made my blood run cold. "Hazel, by the time you read this, you'll be hours away from making the biggest mistake of your life. I'm sorry to do this to you on your wedding day, but you need to know the truth. David and I have been together for 5 years. He promised to leave me and tell you everything before the wedding, but I know he won't. He's using you for your family's business connections. Your mother owns Morrison and Associates, the PR firm his architecture company desperately needs. He told me once the partnership is secured, he'd find a way out. I can't let him destroy your life the way he's destroyed mine. You deserve better. The proof is in his phone. Check his messages with Rachel M. I'm so sorry. Melissa Grant." I read it 3 times, each word hitting harder than the last. My daughter, my beautiful, trusting Hazel, was about to marry a man who was playing her, using her. And this woman, Melissa, was trying to save her from making a terrible mistake. Or was she? I sat on my couch for 20 minutes, staring at that letter and photo, my mind racing through possibilities. Was this real? Was Melissa Grant a scorned ex trying to ruin Hazel's happiness? Or was David Chin actually the monster this letter painted him to be? I couldn't go to Hazel with this. Not without knowing for certain. If this was a lie, I'd plant doubt in her mind right before her wedding. But if it was true, I had less than 2 weeks to expose it before she walked down that aisle. I did what any mother would do. I started digging. First, I searched for Melissa Grant online. Within minutes, I found her, a marketing consultant living right here in the city, with a LinkedIn profile showing she'd worked at several firms David's company had partnered with over the years. Her social media was mostly private, but her professional photo matched the woman in the picture with David. This wasn't some random person. Melissa Grant was real, and she moved in the same professional circles as David. Next, I called my sister Karen, the only person I trusted completely. She'd been through a messy divorce 10 years earlier and had learned to spot red flags I'd never had to look for in my own stable marriage. "Lynn, slow down," Karen said when I finished explaining everything in one breathless rush. "You opened Hazel's wedding dress box and found a letter from another woman claiming David's been cheating? I know how it sounds, but Karen, what if it's true? What if I ignore this and Hazel marries him? Then you need real proof." Not just a letter and a photo that could be from years ago. You need evidence. That's when Karen said something that changed everything. David's company, Chun and Associates Architecture, didn't they just pitch for that new waterfront development project? Yes. Hazel mentioned it last month. She said it was the biggest opportunity of David's career. And your PR firm is representing the development company, right? My stomach dropped. Morrison and Associates has been their PR team for 3 years. The pieces started falling into place with sickening clarity. David had started dating Hazel shortly after the development company became our client. He'd been charming, attentive, always interested in my work. I'd thought he was just being polite, making conversation with his future mother-in-law. What if Melissa was right? What if this whole relationship was about business? Karen and I met the next morning at a coffee shop across town where no one would recognize us. She'd brought her laptop and a notepad, ready to help me unravel this mystery before it was too late. First thing, Karen said, opening her laptop. We need to verify the timeline. When exactly did David and Hazel meet? I pulled out my phone and scrolled back through photos. The charity gala was September 15th, 2 years ago. I remember because it was right after Hazel got promoted to senior analyst at her investment firm. Karen typed rapidly. And when did the waterfront development company hire Morrison and Associates? I checked my work calendar. August 22nd, same year. Almost a month before the gala. Lynn, that gala, who organized it? My heart sank as the memory surfaced. The development company. It was their annual fundraiser for the Children's Hospital. Karen looked at me with grim understanding. So David knew exactly who Hazel was before he ever asked her to dance. He knew her mother ran the PR firm for his biggest potential client. My daughter's wedding dress arrived at my house instead of hers. I was so proud when he came over. When I opened the box to check it, I found something that made my heart stop. Sustainable investing. Hidden in the layers of silk, I thought it was romantic that would expose a secret no mother should ever discover. What you thought was fate before we go further, please let me know in the comments. We spent the next 2 hours building a timeline. And if you've ever discovered every major milestone in David and Hazel's relationship, I'm Linda Morrison, aligned suspiciously with business. I've been helping my daughter Hazel plan their first vacation together happened right after Morrison and Associates. She was marrying David Chun, the development company's contract. A successful architect she'd met. David proposed charity gala 2 weeks after his architectural firm. They seemed perfect together. Their bid for the waterfront charming, project. Thoughtful, always a bid that was still pending. I thought I knew everything about their relationship. I said finally. I was wrong. I need to hear her story. It started on a Wednesday afternoon. Karen nodded. April. But carefully, Hazel had ordered her wedding dress unstable or has ulterior motives downtown. You don't want to make things because worse. She was traveling for work. Finding Melissa's contact information for final delivery could easier than expected. Just keep it safe until the weekend, public on her consulting website. Said over the phone. I wrote and rewrote the message a dozen times to be on my wedding day. Sending it. I promised I wouldn't. My name is Linda Morrison. But when the large white box I'm Hazel's mother, carried carefully to my doorstep by 2 I need to know the truth before my daughter makes a decision she can't. The box was damaged on one corner. If you're willing to talk, the cardboard torn and water stained. Linda, my instinct as a mother kicked at 2:47 p.m. What if the dress inside was ruined? My phone rang. Hazel had spent months finding the perfect. The voice on the other end was shaky. I couldn't let her discover damage. I didn't think you'd actually contact me. So I broke my promise. I wasn't even sure you'd open the box before the wedding. The dress itself was breathtaking. Tell me everything, I said. Layers of ivory silk and delicate lace. We met at a small park on the outskirts of town, streaming through my living room somewhere window. Neutral where we wouldn't be spotted. I carefully lifted it out. Melissa Grant looked exactly like her photos. Mid-30s, everything seemed perfect, but with dark circles. I was about to put it back when my hand brushed against something hard tucked into the inner lining near the bodice. She sat down on the bench beside me, a small envelope, clutching a folder against her chest like a shield. With Hazel's name written on it. I didn't want to do this. I didn't recognize immediately. My hands trembled as I held that envelope, hiding that letter in every instinct told me to put it back. But David left me no choice and pretend I'd never seen it. But something about the way it was hidden, if I deliberately tucked into the dress lining. The dress shop was the only way I getting ready on her wedding day. How did you even know about the dress? Twist with dread. I asked. I opened it. David told me. Inside was a handwritten letter on expensive stationery. Her voice cracked and a photograph. We've been together for 5 years. The photo showed David with another woman. We were living together until 8 months ago when he suddenly moved out, both of them laughing at some restaurant I didn't recognize. Then I found out about Hazel. They looked comfortable together. She opened the folder and spread photographs, the kind of ease that comes from knowing someone well. Not just the one I'd seen, the letter that made my blood run cold. David and Melissa, by the time you read this, on vacation you'll be hours away from making the biggest family gathering. In one photo, to do this she was wearing an engagement ring, but you need to know the truth. He proposed to me 3 years ago. David and I have been together for 5 years. He promised planning a small wedding, tell you everything before the wedding. But I know his business wasn't stable enough yet. He's using you for your family's business needed to secure bigger clients. Your mother owns Morrison and Associates. Then he met Hazel. My hands shook as I picked up the company desperately needs.
If you were engaged,
he
why
told
didn't
me once
Hazel
the
know
partnership
about
is
you?
secured.
Because
he'd
David
find a
is
way
very,
out.
very good at
I can't let him
compartmentalizing
destroy
his
your
life.
life the way he's
He
destroyed
told me he had to
mine.
travel for
You
work
deserve
constantly.
better.
The
Meanwhile,
proof is in his
he was
phone.
building a
Check his
relationship
messages
with your
with
daughter.
Rachel M.
By the time I realized what was
sorry.
happening,
Melissa
he'd already
Grant.
moved into a
I
new
read it
apartment
3 times
and stopped
each
wearing
word
his
hitting
ring.
harder than the
Did
last.
you confront him?
My
Many
daughter,
times.
my beautiful, trusting
Melissa's
Hazel,
eyes filled
was
with
about to
tears.
marry a man
He
who
said
was playing
Hazel
her,
was just a business
using
connection.
her. And this
That he
woman,
needed to stay
Melissa,
close to her
was trying to
because of your
save her
PR
from
firm.
making a terrible
He
mistake.
promised he'd end it once
was
his
she?
company secured
I sat
the
on my
waterfront
couch
project.
for 20 minutes,
But then he
staring
proposed
at
to
that
her
letter
instead.
and photo.
She
My
pulled out
mind
her
racing
phone
through
and showed me text
possibilities.
messages.
Was this real?
Hundreds of them.
Was
between
Melissa
her and
Grant a
David.
scorned ex?
The
trying
most
to
recent
ruin
was
Hazel's
from 3 days
happiness?
ago.
Or was David Chin
just
actually
2 more
the
weeks
monster this letter
after the
painted him
wedding?
to be?
Everything
I couldn't
will be
go
in
to
place.
Hazel with this. Then I can
Not
figure
without
out how to
knowing for
transition
certain.
out gracefully.
If this was a lie,
Melissa,
I'd plant
you're
doubt
actually
in her
going
mind
through
right
with
before
marrying
her
her?
wedding.
But if
David,
it was true,
it's complicated.
I had less than 2 weeks
Morrison
to
and
expose it
Associates
before she
is
walked
about
down
to
that
recommend
aisle.
us for the
I did what
project.
any mother would do.
I can't back out now.
I started digging.
Melissa,
First,
what
I
about
searched
me?
for Melissa Grant
What about
online.
us?
Within
David,
minutes, I
you
found
know I
her.
love you.
A marketing
This is
consultant
business.
living right
Be
here in the
patient.
city.
I
With a
felt
LinkedIn
nauseated
profile
reading
showing
their
she'd worked
exchange.
at several firms.
He's telling
David's
you he still
company
loves
had
you while
partnered
he's
with
planning
over
to
the
marry my
years.
daughter.
Her social
He's been
media
saying
was
that for
mostly
months.
private.
At
But her
first, I
professional
believed him.
photo matched the
I
woman
thought
in
he'd
the
come to
picture
his
with
senses.
David.
But
This
last
wasn't
week,
some random
I
person.
realized he's not
Melissa
choosing
Grant
between
was
us.
real.
He's
And
planning
she
to have
moved
both
in the
of
same
us.
professional circles
Hazel
as
for the
David.
business connections
Next,
and social
I called my
standing.
sister
You for
Karen,
everything
the only
else.
person I trusted completely.
That's why you sent the letter.
She'd been through a messy
couldn't let him
divorce
destroy
10
her
years
life the
earlier
way he's
and
destroyed
had learned to
mine.
spot red flags
Hazel doesn't
I'd never
deserve
had to
this.
look for in my own
And honestly,
stable
Mrs.
marriage.
Morrison,
Lynn,
neither
slow
do you.
down.
He talks
Karen
about your
said when I
firm
finished
like it's
explaining
explaining
everything
everything
in one breathless
not a family
rush.
business built on
You
your
opened
reputation.
Hazel's wedding dress box.
Karen,
who'd
who'd
found
been
a
sitting
letter from
quietly
another
nearby,
woman claiming
finally
David's been
spoke up.
cheating.
Do you
I
have
know
any
how it
proof
sounds,
that
but
David
Karen,
specifically
what if it's
pursued
true?
Hazel because of
What if I
Linda's
ignore
company?
this and Hazel
Melissa
marries him?
nodded and pulled
Then
out
you
more
need real
screenshots.
proof. Not just a
Email
letter and a
exchanges
photo
with his
that
business
could be
partner,
from years ago.
Mark Sullivan.
You need evidence.
Look at this one from
That's
2
when Karen
weeks
said
before the
something that
charity
changed
gala.
everything. The email read,
David's company,
Mark,
Chin and
I've done
Associates
research on the
Architecture.
key players at
Didn't they
Morrison
just
and
pitch for
Associates.
that new waterfront
Linda
development
Morrison's
project?
daughter Hazel
Yes.
will be at the fundraiser.
Hazel mentioned it last
Investment
month.
analyst.
She said it was
unmarried,
the biggest
active in the same
opportunity of
charity
David's
circles
career.
we need access
And
to.
your PR firm
This
is
could be our way
representing
in.
the development
Time
company,
to turn on
right?
the charm. My stomach
I
dropped.
sat in my car for
Morrison
30
and
minutes
Associates
after
has
leaving
been their
Melissa,
PR team for
staring
3
at the
years.
copies she'd given me.
The pieces started
Photographs,
falling into
text
place
messages,
with sickening
emails.
clarity.
All
David
painting
had
a
started
picture of a
dating
man
Hazel
who'd
shortly
orchestrated
after
my
the
daughter's
development
romance
company
like a
became
business
our client.
transaction.
He'd been
Karen
charming,
sat in the
attentive,
passenger
always
seat,
interested in my
quiet
work.
for once.
I thought he
letting
was
me
just being
process.
polite.
I have to
making
tell Hazel
conversation with his
I finally
future
said,
mother-in-law. Are you
What
sure
if
you want to
Melissa
do
was
this
right?
alone? What if this
Maybe
whole
we should.
relationship was about
No.
business?
This needs to come
Karen
from
and
me.
I met the next
She needs
morning
to
at
hear
a
it from
coffee
her
shop
mother.
across town.
That
where
evening,
no one
I
would
called
recognize
Hazel
us and asked her to
She
come
brought
over.
her laptop
I
and a
told her I
notepad,
needed help with
ready
some
to help
wedding
me unravel
details,
this
nothing
mystery
urgent
before it was
just
too late.
mother-daughter time. First thing,
She arrived
Karen
an hour
said,
later
opening
with
her
Thai
laptop,
takeout
and
we
a
need to
smile
verify
that
the
broke my
timeline.
heart.
When
Mom,
exactly
you
did
sounded
David and
stressed
Hazel
on the
meet?
phone. I
Everything
pulled out
okay.
my phone and scrolled
She set
back
the
through
food on my
photos.
kitchen counter.
The charity
and gave
gala
me a
was
hug.
September 15th.
I'd rehearsed
2
this
years
conversation
ago.
100
I
times
remember
in my
because
head.
it was right
But
after
now that
Hazel
she
got
was
promoted
here,
to senior
standing in my
analyst at her
kitchen looking so
investment firm.
happy,
So
Karen
trusting,
typed rapidly.
I couldn't find
And
the
when did the
words.
waterfront development
Hazel's
company
sweetheart,
hire
sit
Morrison
down.
and Associates?
There's something I need to show
I
you.
checked my work calendar.
The concern on her face
August
deepened.
22nd, same
You're
year.
scaring me. Almost
What's
a month
wrong?
before the gala.
I placed the folder
Lynn,
on the
that
table
gala,
between us.
who organized it?
Your wedding dress
My heart
arrived
sank
damaged
as
the
so I
memory
opened the box
surfaced.
to check it.
The development
I found a
company.
letter inside.
It was their annual
from a woman
fundraiser
named
for
Melissa
the Children's
Grant.
Hospital.
Hazel's face
Karen
went
looked
pale.
at me with grim
Melissa,
understanding.
you know her?
So David knew
David
exactly
mentioned
who
Hazel
once.
was before he
An
ever asked her to
ex-girlfriend from
dance.
years ago.
He knew
He
her
said it
mother
ended
ran the
badly,
PR
that
firm
she
for
was
his biggest
unstable.
potential client.
Why would she?
Hazel's
Hazel's hands trembled as she reached for the folder. I watched my daughter's face as she read Melissa's letter, looked through the photographs, scrolled through the text messages on my phone. With each piece of evidence, something inside her seemed to crack. "These texts are from 3 days ago," she whispered. "He was texting her 3 days ago saying he loves her? Hazel, there's more." I showed her the email about targeting her at the charity gala. "Melissa believes David pursued you because of my company's connection to the waterfront development project." "No." Hazel stood up abruptly, knocking her chair backward. "No, that's not we fell in love, Mom. It wasn't some calculated business move. He proposed to me because he loves me. I know this is devastating, but did it ever occur to you that Melissa might be lying? That she's a jealous ex trying to ruin my wedding?" Hazel's voice rose, defensive and desperate. "David warned me about her. He said if she ever contacted our family, I shouldn't believe anything she said." "He warned you?" "Yes. Months ago. He said Melissa couldn't accept that their relationship was over. that she'd tried to interfere with his life before. Hazel grabbed her purse. I can't believe you're doing this to me 11 days before my wedding. Did you even think about how this would make me feel? Hazel, please. I'm going to talk to David. He'll explain everything. And Mom. She turned at the door, tears streaming down her face. I really hope you're wrong about this. Because if you're not, I don't know how I'll ever trust anyone again. The door slammed behind her, and I was left standing alone in my kitchen, wondering if I'd just made everything worse. For 2 days, I heard nothing from Hazel. My calls went to voicemail. My texts remained unanswered. Karen tried to reassure me that Hazel just needed time to process, but I couldn't shake the fear that I'd destroyed our relationship by exposing the truth. On the 3rd day, my doorbell rang at 6 a.m. Hazel stood on my porch, still wearing yesterday's clothes, mascara smudged under red, swollen eyes. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. "Mom," she whispered and collapsed into my arms, sobbing. I held her tightly, guiding her inside to the couch where I wrapped a blanket around her shoulders. I didn't ask questions. I just waited, holding her hand while she cried out 2 days' worth of heartbreak. Finally, she spoke. "You were right. About everything." My heart broke for her. "Oh, sweetheart." I confronted David that night after I left here. Showed him the photos, the texts, Melissa's letter. At first, he denied everything. Said Melissa was obsessed, that she'd faked the evidence somehow. He was so convincing, Mom. So calm and reasonable. He held me and promised that none of it was true. Hazel pulled the blanket tighter around herself. I wanted to believe him so badly. So I did something I've never done before. I went through his phone while he was sleeping. And the messages with Melissa were deleted, but he'd saved them in a hidden folder. Hundreds of messages, Mom. He'd been telling her he loved her while he was telling me the same thing. Planning to keep seeing her after we got married. There were messages with his business partner too, talking about how close they were to sealing the deal with Morrison and Associates through our marriage. Her voice broke on the word marriage, and fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. But the worst part? I found emails he'd sent to investors about the waterfront project. He specifically mentioned that his upcoming marriage to Hazel Morrison would strengthen key relationships and guarantee favorable positioning for the contract. He quantified our relationship, Mom. Put a dollar value on what my family connections were worth to his business. I pulled her close, letting her cry against my shoulder the way she used to as a little girl when the world felt too big and scary. I woke him up at 3 a.m. and threw the phone at him. Told him I knew everything. You know what he did? Hazel's voice turned bitter. He didn't even try to deny it anymore. He just got angry. Said I was overreacting, that every successful marriage is partly strategic, that I was being naive if I thought love and business couldn't coexist. What did you say? I told him the wedding was off, that he needed to leave his apartment, the one I'd been paying half the rent on for 8 months, by the end of the week. He actually laughed, Mom. He said I'd regret throwing away a perfectly good partnership over sentimentality. Hazel looked at me with eyes that seemed years older than they had 3 days ago. He never loved me, did he? It was all an act from the very beginning. I wanted to comfort her with a lie, to tell her that David must have felt something real for her. But Hazel deserved the truth, no matter how painful. I don't think someone capable of that kind of deception understands love the way you do, sweetheart. And I'm so sorry you had to learn that this way. Melissa called me yesterday, Hazel continued. She apologized for the letter, for the timing, for everything. We talked for 2 hours. She's as much a victim as I am. David played us both. What are you going to do now? Hazel straightened up, wiping her eyes with determination I recognized from her childhood. The same look she'd get when she fell off her bike and insisted on getting right back on. First, I'm canceling the wedding. Then I'm calling every vendor, every guest, everyone who needs to know. And then, she paused, her expression hardening. Then I'm making sure David Chin never uses anyone like this again. The next 72 hours were a whirlwind of phone calls, cancellations, and difficult conversations. Hazel handled it with a strength I'd never seen in her before. She called the venue, the caterer, the florist, calmly explaining that the wedding was off and accepting whatever financial losses came with it. Money doesn't matter anymore, Mom, she said when I offered to help with the cancellation fees. My dignity matters. The truth matters. Hazel also did something I didn't expect. She called Melissa and invited her to coffee. I need to understand the whole picture, Hazel explained to me. We're not enemies. We're both survivors of the same con artist. I didn't go with them, but Hazel told me everything afterward. They'd sat in that coffee shop for 4 hours, comparing stories, finding all the places where David's lies intersected. Melissa had been told Hazel was just a business contact. Hazel had been told Melissa was an unstable ex. Both had been promised futures that David never intended to deliver. "We're actually a lot alike," Hazel said with a sad smile. "Both of us are driven, successful women who believed in someone who didn't deserve our trust. Melissa is hurting just as much as I am." But Hazel wasn't finished. 2 days before what would have been her wedding day, she asked me to set up a meeting. "With who?" I asked. "James Hartley, the CEO of Hartley Development, your biggest client and the one overseeing the waterfront project." My stomach dropped. "Hazel, what are you planning?" "The truth, Mom. David built his entire scheme around the assumption that we'd all stay silent, that I'd be too embarrassed to expose him, that you'd protect your business reputation, that Melissa would just disappear. But I'm done being silent." The meeting took place in my office at Morrison & Associates. James Hartley arrived looking confused. I'd only told him we needed to discuss something urgent regarding the waterfront project. Hazel came prepared. She'd organized everything into a presentation. The timeline of David's pursuit, the emails about targeting her for business connections, the messages proving he'd maintained another relationship while engaged, the explicit statements about using our marriage to secure contracts. James listened to everything, his expression growing darker with each revelation. "Mr. Hartley," Hazel concluded, "I know Chin and Associates submitted a bid for your waterfront project. I also know my mother's firm has been advising you on public relations for this development. What you need to understand is that David Chin built his entire proposal around a personal connection he manufactured through deception." "These emails," James said, picking up the copies Hazel had provided. "He specifically mentions leveraging your family relationship to influence contract decisions?" "Yes, and he discussed it with his business partner as a strategy, not as a genuine relationship." James was quiet for a long moment, then looked at me. "Linda, I need to ask you directly. Did you know about any of this? Were you planning to advocate for Chun and Associates because of your daughter's engagement?" "Absolutely not," I said firmly. "I've kept my personal life separate from my professional recommendations. I didn't know about David's intentions until 5 days ago. If anything, I've been more careful not to show favoritism." "I believe you." James stood up and gathered the documents. "I want you to know that Chun and Associates was already on our shortlist, but this information changes everything. We don't do business with people who manipulate personal relationships for professional gain. It speaks to a lack of integrity that would concern us in any partnership." Hazel exhaled with visible relief. "Thank you for listening." "No, thank you for bringing this to my attention." "And Hazel?" James paused at the door. "I'm sorry this happened to you, but your courage in exposing it probably saved your mother's company from a very problematic association." After he left, Hazel turned to me with tears in her eyes. "Do you think I did the right thing?" "You did exactly the right thing. You protected yourself, protected me, and exposed someone who was willing to deceive everyone around him for money." But the story wasn't over. 2 days later, the day that should have been Hazel's wedding, David showed up at my office furious. Security called up from the lobby. "Mrs. Morrison, there's a David Chun here demanding to see you. He's quite agitated. Should we send him away?" I looked at Hazel, who'd been helping me organize files in my office. Her face went pale, but then something shifted. Fear replaced by resolve. "Let him come up," I said. "But have security stand by on this floor." "Mom, are you sure? He's going to find out eventually that we went to James Hartley. Better to face him now, together, in a controlled environment." David burst through my office door 3 minutes later, his usual polished composure completely shattered. His hair was disheveled, his tie loose, and fury radiated from every movement. "What the hell did you do?" he shouted, pointing at Hazel. "Hartley Development just pulled their offer. 5 years of work gone. They said they have concerns about my professional ethics. You did this." "Lower your voice," I said calmly, standing between him and Hazel. "And don't you dare speak to my daughter that way. Your daughter just destroyed my career. Do you understand what you've done?" He turned his rage on me. "Morrison and Associates was supposed to recommend us. We had an understanding." "We never had an understanding," I said coldly. "You manufactured a relationship with my daughter to create one. That's called fraud, David. It's called networking. It's how business works. Everyone uses connections." "Not like this," Hazel's voice cut through his tirade. She stepped around me to face him directly. You pursued me as a business strategy. You proposed to me to secure a contract. You maintained another relationship with Melissa while planning our wedding. You lied to everyone. David's expression shifted, the anger giving way to something calculating. Melissa fed you that story? She's obsessed, Hazel. I told you she was unstable. I read your emails, David. Your actual emails where you discussed targeting me, where you quantified what my family was worth to your business. I saw the messages where you told Melissa you'd transition out gracefully after our wedding. Stop lying. For a moment, David seemed to deflate. Then his eyes hardened. Fine. You want the truth? Yes, I saw an opportunity when I met you. Yes, I knew who your mother was. But what we had was real, Hazel. I did fall in love with you. No, Hazel said quietly. You fell in love with what I could do for your career. There's a difference. You're making a mistake. We could have had a good life together. Now you've embarrassed us both, cost me the biggest deal of my career. And for what? Because your feelings got hurt. The casual cruelty of that statement hung in the air. Get out, I said. And if you come near my daughter or my business again, I'll file for a restraining order. You haven't heard the last of this, David threatened. I have lawyers. I've invested 2 years in this relationship, and I'm entitled to. Entitled to what? Hazel's voice rose. To the connection you tried to steal? To the contract you tried to manipulate? You're entitled to nothing, David. You built your entire plan on deception, and now it's collapsed. That's not our fault. That's yours. Security appeared in the doorway, responding to the raised voices. Mr. Chin was just leaving, I said. David looked between Hazel and me, seeming to realize for the first time that he'd truly lost. Not just the contract, not just the wedding, but any remaining shred of dignity. You'll regret this, he said, but the words sounded hollow. No, Hazel replied. The only thing I regret is not seeing who you really were sooner. After security escorted David out, Hazel collapsed into a chair, shaking. That was harder than I expected, she admitted. You were incredible, I said, kneeling beside her. You stood up to him. You protected yourself. I kept thinking about what he said, that everyone uses connections, that it's just how business works. Mom, am I being naive? Is this really what the professional world is like? No, sweetheart. There's a difference between networking and manipulation. People build genuine relationships that naturally lead to professional opportunities. What David did was different. He fabricated an entire romance, lied to multiple people, and treated human beings like stepping stones. That's not networking. That's sociopathy. Hazel nodded slowly. Melissa texted me earlier. She said David called her too, blaming her for everything. He told her she'd ruined his life by being vindictive. He's not taking responsibility for any of it. No, and he probably never will. People like David don't think they've done anything wrong. They genuinely believe that everyone else is just too soft to play the game the way they do. 3 months passed. The date that should have been Hazel's wedding came and went quietly. She'd taken a week off work, and we spent it together at a cabin upstate. No phones, no emails, just mother and daughter healing in the silence of the woods. You know what's strange? Hazel said one evening as we sat on the porch watching the sunset. I don't miss him. I miss who I thought he was, but that person never existed. I'm mourning a ghost. That's the hardest part of this kind of betrayal, I told her. Grieving someone who was never real to begin with. Hazel had started therapy with Dr. Sarah Chun, no relation to David, thankfully. The sessions were helping her process not just the betrayal, but the questions about her own judgment that haunted her. How did I not see it? She'd asked me repeatedly in those early weeks. How did I miss all the signs? Because you loved him, and love makes us want to believe the best in people. That's not a weakness, Hazel. That's what makes you human. Melissa had also reached out several times. She and Hazel had formed an unexpected friendship. 2 women bonded by shared experience and mutual healing. They met for coffee every few weeks, comparing notes on their recovery and supporting each other through the difficult days. Melissa's thinking about writing an article, Hazel told me one afternoon, about romance fraud and how it's not just about money. It can be about business connections, social status, any kind of leverage. She wants to warn other women. How do you feel about that? I think it's brave. And necessary. David wasn't unique. There are probably dozens of men and women out there running similar schemes, using relationships as business tools. People need to know. The professional fallout for David was significant. After Hartley Development withdrew their consideration, word spread quietly through the industry. Chun and Associates lost 2 other potential contracts when clients learned about David's methods. His business partner, Mark Sullivan, dissolved their partnership and publicly distanced himself from David's personal conduct. David tried to rebuild, even reached out to some mutual acquaintances claiming Hazel had overreacted to a misunderstanding. But the emails and text messages were too damning. The evidence too clear. "I heard he moved to Chicago," Hazel mentioned casually one day months later. "Starting over with a new firm there. How does that make you feel?" She considered the question carefully. Relieved that he's gone. Worried for whoever he targets next. But mostly free. Like I finally closed a chapter that should have never been written in the first place. Morrison and Associates survived the scandal unscathed. If anything, James Hartley's respect for how we handled the situation strengthened our professional relationship. He referred 2 new clients to us, specifically mentioning that he valued our integrity. "Your mother's company operates with honor," he told Hazel at a charity event 6 months later. "That's rare in this business. The way you both handled that situation, coming forward even though it was personally devastating, that takes real courage." Hazel had started dating again, cautiously. A colleague introduced her to Marcus, a teacher who knew nothing about investment banking or development deals and had no interest in learning. Their first 3 dates were at pizza places and bowling alleys, deliberately ordinary, refreshingly real. "He asked me about my favorite books," Hazel told me, laughing. "Not my professional connections or my family's business. Just what I like to read. It felt so normal, Mom. So genuine. That's how it's supposed to feel." 1 year after finding Melissa's letter in the wedding dress, Hazel and I returned to that same park bench where Melissa and I had first met. This time, all 3 of us sat together. "I never properly thanked you," Hazel said to Melissa, "for being brave enough to tell me the truth. I was furious at first, but you saved me from making the biggest mistake of my life." "I just couldn't let him do to you what he did to me," Melissa replied. "We both deserved better." "We did, and we found it, just not in the way we expected." Hazel gestured between the 3 of us. "I found strength I didn't know I had. Mom and I became closer, and you and I found an unlikely friendship." Melissa smiled. "My therapist says that sometimes the worst experiences lead to the most important growth." I hated hearing that at first, but I think she might be right. "The article you wrote," I said. "I heard it's getting picked up by several publications." "It is, and I've heard from so many women and men who've experienced similar manipulation. People who were targeted for their money, their connections, their social status. It's more common than anyone wants to admit." "What's the most important thing you want people to know?" Hazel asked. Melissa thought for a moment. "That it's not your fault. When someone deliberately deceives you, when they construct an elaborate lie, that's on them, not you. Trusting people isn't naive, it's human. The problem isn't the people who trust. It's the people who exploit that trust." As I sit here now, 2 years after finding that letter hidden in Hazel's wedding dress, I'm struck by how much has changed, and how much we've all learned from that painful chapter. Hazel thrives in ways I never expected. She's still the same driven, successful woman she was before, but now there's a wisdom in her eyes, a careful strength that comes from surviving betrayal and choosing to grow from it rather than become bitter. She and Marcus got engaged last month. A quiet, genuine moment with no hidden agendas, just 2 people who truly love each other. "I'm not afraid this time, Mom," she told me when she showed me the ring. "I know the difference now between someone who loves me and someone who loves what I can do for them." Melissa published her article, which became a book, Calculated Hearts, Recognizing Romance Fraud Beyond Financial Scams, is now required reading in several college business ethics courses. She speaks at conferences about the intersection of personal relationships and professional manipulation, helping others recognize the red flags she and Hazel missed. The 3 of us still meet quarterly for dinner, an unlikely friendship born from shared trauma, but sustained by genuine affection and mutual respect. As for David Chun, I heard through professional circles that he tried similar tactics in Chicago, but was exposed within 6 months, when 2 women compared notes and discovered he'd been engaged to both of them simultaneously while pursuing business deals with their families. Some people never learn. Some people never want to. But this story isn't really about David. It's about the 3 women who refused to stay silent, who chose truth over comfort, and who transformed betrayal into purpose. Looking back, there are truths I wish I'd known earlier. Lessons that might help someone else recognize danger before it's too late. Trust your instincts. When I saw that damaged box and felt compelled to open it despite my promise, some part of me knew something was wrong. Our intuition often sees patterns our conscious mind hasn't processed yet. Don't ignore that inner voice. Perfect can be a red flag. David seemed too perfect, always saying the right thing, always interested in exactly the right topics. Real people are flawed and inconsistent. Be wary of anyone who seems to have studied you too carefully. Watch how they treat others. The way David dismissed Melissa as unstable, without empathy, should have concerned us. People who casually discard or demean others will eventually do the same to you. Consistency matters more than grand gestures. David excelled at romantic moments and impressive dates, but the small, daily acts of genuine care were missing. Real love shows up in ordinary moments, not just orchestrated ones. Financial and professional boundaries are healthy. When someone's interest in your career, connections, or family business seems disproportionate to their interest in you as a person, pay attention. You're not responsible for someone else's deception. Hazel tortured herself wondering how she missed the signs. But David was skilled at manipulation. That's not her failure, it's his crime. Speaking up protects others. Hazel's courage in exposing David probably saved other women from the same fate. Silence protects predators. Truth protects communities. As a mother, those weeks were the hardest of my life. Watching your child's heart break, knowing you're the one who revealed the truth that shattered her dreams, it's excruciating. There were moments I questioned whether I should have stayed silent, let her marry David, and hoped for the best. But I know now that wasn't love. That would have been cowardice disguised as kindness. Real love tells hard truths. Real love risks the relationship to protect the person. Real love trusts that pain today is better than devastation tomorrow. Hazel once told me, "Mom, you saved my life by opening that box. Not just from David, but from a future of lies." That's when I knew, even though the path was agonizing, we'd made it through to the other side. Today, Hazel's wedding dress hangs in my guest room closet, not as a reminder of what could have been, but as a symbol of what was prevented. She jokes that she should donate it, but I think we both know why it stays. It represents the moment everything changed, the moment we chose truth over comfort. Sometimes I think about that letter, about Melissa's courage to reach out despite knowing she'd be seen as the villain, about how one woman's bravery created a chain reaction that saved another woman's future. Life has a strange way of putting the right information in front of us at exactly the right moment. That damaged box, that hidden letter, that impossible choice, they were all part of a bigger picture I couldn't see at the time. Now I see clearly. Sometimes the worst day of your life is actually saving you from something far worse. Sometimes betrayal is a blessing in disguise. And sometimes the greatest act of love is opening a box you promised you'd keep closed. If there's one thing I want you to take from our story, it's this. Trust is precious, but truth is priceless. Don't ignore red flags because you want something to work. Don't silence your instincts because speaking up feels uncomfortable. And never, ever let someone convince you that manipulation is just how the world works. Real love doesn't need schemes. Real relationships don't need calculations. And real family will always tell you the hard truths, even when it hurts. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe to Stories from Family. Share this with someone who might need to hear it. And in the comments below, let me know. Have you ever discovered a truth that changed everything? Your story matters, and I'd love to hear it. Remember, the truth may hurt, but lies destroy. Choose truth. Choose courage. Choose yourself.